Hey, what's going on, guys? I am Follygon, and welcome back to another video where I attempt to sculpt and draw the same portrait in 1 hour each. If you are new around here, click that subscribe button and check out the links down below for things like my custom sculpting brushes, some online tutorials, and my Patreon, where you can get a behind-the-scenes look at what I'm working on, as well as additional monthly tutorials, my private Discord community, and a bunch of other stuff as well. Let's get started off with the drawing portion, which of course I always do in Procreate. I use an iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil. It's been a lot of fun, and this one was a little bit different than what I've been kind of playing around and experimenting with, which is using a pencil, specifically the default technical pencil. I'm not normally a fan of all the pencil tools in Procreate because I'm not super familiar with how to use them. When you kind of tilt it to the side, it has this weird kind of shading effect, and I'm not a fan of that. But the technical pencil kind of gets rid of that restriction. So here is my very simple 2D result. Nothing really crazy. Still experimenting, still learning. If you're new around here and know nothing about me, I have just started getting into 2D art, and it's something very new for me. More of a hobby than anything else, but there is my 2D drawing after only an hour. Not very good, but that's okay. It's all about continuing to progress and try to get better. And that means now that we're done with that, we can, of course, get in here to the 3D sculpture, which is going to be made, as always, in ZBrush. I am a professional digital sculptor. All my eggs in one basket as a 3D artist. A lot of people maybe look at someone that creates digital sculpts or even traditional sculpts and assumes that they know how to draw, but that is obviously not the case here. So starting off with the block out here, I'm actually using something that updates my geometry on the fly. It's a mode called Sculptress Pro mode, and it's very nice. Essentially, it allows you, as you sculpt and pull out your geometry, you don't have to worry about dynameshing or remeshing, redistributing your polys. It just does it all as you make every single brush stroke. So it's a really cool mode. I don't typically use it very often myself because of the way my brushes are set up. I use some automatic masking features that don't allow me to use Sculptress Pro mode, but pretty much every time I use Sculptress Pro mode, I am a really big fan of it. It allows you to work super quick depending on, your workflow process. Obviously, everything here is just being pulled out from a singular mesh, other than I think the ears and eyes, which are added on separately. For the most part, up to this state, I pretty much don't really use a whole lot of brushes. When I sculpt, I don't really use a whole lot of brushes, to be completely honest. If you are interested in my custom brushes, you can of course get them down at the link down in the description. They're great for beginners as well as advanced users alike. I've been using them for a long time. I continue to edit them, and of course there's free updates on those brushes for life. So throughout the years, or multiple years now up to this point, I've updated them many times, and people who bought them, years ago for only $1 still get them all for free now. But of course, as I add more, I continually to increase the price, yada yada, etc. Check them out if you're interested, but for the most part, I am more than comfortable saying that you can do everything here with the default brushes in ZBrush. I am actually a huge proponent of trying out all the default brushes, finding out what you like. If you do want that little head start though, you can always grab mine, but I am more than comfortable just using the default brushes. That's why in all my tutorials, I try to use just all the default brushes to make sure that you guys can follow along if at all possible, or I show you a comparable brush here. For the most part, clay brush to kind of carve in and add form on top. The clay buildup is a fantastic default brush. A trim brush of any kind, trim dynamic is really nice for planing out shapes. Any kind of pinch brush, the default pinch, of course, being a very good brush as well. And really that's it, other than I think a move brush, which is, in my opinion, not really even a brush. It just kind of pushes and pulls stuff around. But really that's about it. That's kind of my main workhorse in terms of brushes. But continuing on with this process, I feel like I nailed down the, let's say, major proportions for the character pretty quick. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to do, a lot of progress that needs to be made up to this point as I start to get those secondary shapes onto my surface. Always starting off with kind of a rigid, let's say, ugly placement for things like the lips, nose, eyes, etc. And then you have to slowly go back in and refine those. I feel like it's very easy, even for me, to start sculpting something like a pair of lips, have them immediately look ugly after just a few brush strokes, And that can be very distracting for you. You can kind of get stuck in that headspace where you're like, I don't like what it looks like. I need to push past this and progress past this point. And I want to talk about that because it's specifically something that I have been noticing in my 2D art. So what's really nice for me is that I get that perspective of being new to an artistic medium all over again. So I can go through the same struggles that a lot of you are probably going through that are new to digital sculpting and 3D modeling. So that mentality of being a lot slower than someone that's a professional and does this every single day, I kind of understand that a lot more now. It's been a while since I've been there, since I haven't, been a beginner at digital sculpting in so long. But in terms of 2D art, I've definitely been noticing that frustration myself. I'll be at a point where I'm starting to, create the head. I'm in the really early stages and it looks horrible. Everything looks ugly. But I try to use the same mentality that I do when I sculpt, which is to jump around as much as possible and not get tunnel vision and focus on any one area. I also find that after about an hour, and one of the main reasons that I only spend an hour on these sketches and the sculpt is that for 2D art, after about an hour of me working on a head, I could push it a little bit further, but not too much. I'm just not really that skilled at taking things past that kind of early point right now. And I'm actually fine with that, even though I know I can push it further, even if it's not very much. I also know that is the area that I need to work on the most. I need to progress the most in those early stages. If I could give one piece of advice, or one really good piece of advice for new sculptors, and maybe just new artists in general, is that you should really focus on quantity above everything else when you are in those early stages of learning that new medium. The simple fact is that you are not going to get nearly as much progress and experience as spending 10 hours working on one thing rather than working on 10 things for 1 hour each. It's just not going to happen. You don't have the knowledge and skill set to take something to that extremely polished state and in the end be very happy with it. If you do, then you're probably at a point where you should be starting to think about focusing more on quantity over quality. This is always kind of a dynamic thing that you need to flow back and forth between. As you hit these brick walls, it's probably another time to go back to quantity. As you feel like you've leveled up and you feel like you can do more, that's probably the time where you should be doing a longer form project and be focusing a little more on quality. Specifically with my sculpts, the only reason I am spending an hour on these, and actually this one was a little bit less than an hour, is so that I can contrast it very nicely with my 2D art. Simply because obviously I'm a much faster sculptor than I am as a 2D painter or sketcher, drawer, whatever you want to call it. See, I'm very, very unfamiliar with the whole 2D art lingo in general. So I'm much faster at 3D, which is a little bit ironic just because digital sculpting is such a slower medium compared to 2D art. I saw someone mention that, both can be slow. That's absolutely true. I am very slow at 2D art, obviously. Both mediums have their pros and cons, but when it comes to 3D art, the simple fact is that you are creating so many different angles and different, aspects of that character. It's not like you're just creating it from a singular angle. So in general, 3D art takes much longer than 2D art for that simple reason. If you didn't notice, I did end up projecting some paint from the 2D image reference. I used that as a base to continue painting on the character, and then I go back over it with a spray brush stroke. So you can apply a number of alphas to the color spray or just standard spray brush stroke to create a variety of different cool painting effects. I believe it's called stippling, if I'm not mistaken, when you take a brush and you put the brush bristles close to your object and then kind of like pull back on it with a finger or your thumb to kind of spray, or stipple, I believe is the correct terminology there. It's a very similar effect that you can get here, and then you can use some other effects to kind of get some hue variance and some value variance in there as well. So a lot of cool techniques here with painting skin. I keep this pretty rough as it is only an hour. I don't have a ton of time to work on it, and I'm just trying to get down sort of the main aspects, the main features as much as I can. But yeah, there's some kind of bonus tips there for painting if you guys are new to painting skin. A standard brush set to RGB with some spray strokes enabled, or some color spray strokes enabled. Pick and choose your alpha, go crazy with them. There's a million of them to kind of pick, and it really doesn't matter all that much. But that is the basic gist here for this head. A lot of it, for the most part, is move brush. I obviously stopped using Sculptor's Pro mode after a certain point because I do have to remesh and kind of make it easier to work with my geometry. If you guys are unfamiliar with that subdivision reprojection workflow, I'll throw a link up in the top hand corner for you guys to check out my #1 tip for all ZBrush users, which of course normally I would say just for beginners, but it's actually a little bit of a trend that I've noticed in recent years, that a lot of people have kind of foregone this early practice that I feel like is typically something that a lot of beginners learn early on. I'm not sure if it's just something that people aren't really teaching anymore, or if there's just not a lot of tutorials on it. So hence why I created my own tutorial on the process, and hopefully you guys who are a little bit newer can find that whole process a lot more helpful for continuing on with your 3D work into the future. But hey, that's gonna be all for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the process. Here's a little side-by-side comparison of my terrible 2D art with my pretty decent 1 hour head here in ZBrush. Again, check out the links down below if you guys are interested in learning more about digital sculpting. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.